Hello and welcome to the AI First Show. This is the show where we talk about all things AI, about tech, about how to use AI in the real world to get real things done. My name is Stephen Barr. Today we have Austin Bourne, founder, CEO of Shinzo Labs. Austin, welcome to the show. Thank you
Yeah,
so much for being here.
yeah, thank you for having me.
Austin, we met at the AI Tinkerers meetup a couple of weeks ago now. But please tell everyone who you are, what your background is, what brought you into technology in general, and then we'll jump into AI and to Shinzo Labs.
Yeah, absolutely. Currently, I'm the founder of Shinzo Labs. I've been working on this company technically since the beginning of the year, so for the last 10 months, and I've been working specifically in the MCP space for the last 3 months. Prior to becoming the founder of Shinzo Labs, I was a software engineer in the crypto industry for the last 5 years. And I had worked at a company called Chainlink Labs, working on all levels of the stack of blockchain. So working on the off-chain external adapters, working on smart contracts for their data feeds and data stream services, and then working on data systems in general. And so I really built a strong foundation of protocols and open source software while I was working there. And then at the end of last year, I decided to take the step to become a new founder in the space. And earlier in the year, around, I want to say February, was when I first learned about MCP, which was this new concept for a protocol for the AI agent industry. And this really caught my interest because I found it to be the first time uh, when I really saw the potential for this foundational protocol that could really revolutionize how we produce AI agents. And I think since then, I dove deep into the MCP space, learned about what servers are being built, what business use cases are being executed with it. And since then, I experimented with some MCP servers that I built myself, got them up to about 20,000 calls, tool calls per month. And as I was building that, I discovered this problem that the MCP space lacked much of the enterprise services and enterprise product infrastructure that traditional software industries like mobile apps and web applications had.
Well, I think that your background in blockchain is kind of a perfect example because we have this new thing, and there's this choice between do we bolt stuff on top of it or
Hmm.
to the side, or do we reinvent a new one every couple of months as we learn our lessons, right? And that's it's almost like the Bitcoin versus Ethereum, right? Should we
Hmm.
should we just bolt stuff on top of it, or what do we do? Do we reinvent the whole thing? I mean, I
Yeah.
was in that space very briefly. I still don't understand nearly as much about it as you do. What did you start with in tech? Kind of zooming back, what was
Yeah.
your starting? Were you front end, back end, or
Yeah. So,
robotics? Or
so uh, my first job out of college was a full stack engineer at a small startup called OmniX. So this was
okay,
already in the crypto digital asset trading space, but the application itself never touched the blockchain directly. It only interfaced with traditional APIs. And that's where I really learned the fundamentals of full stack engineering, working on the database backend, front end. And I also learned a lot about the mechanics of startups, understanding how you go from 0 to 1, how you actually find customers and maintain them, how you ruthlessly prioritize features, and in general, how you build tech that endures over time.
startups are hard. It's a very different thing, and you have to do these pivots, and you have these long term vision, and you also have to like not run out of money,
Hmm.
and those are very
Hmm.
different things. Sometimes, I mean, you hope
Yeah.
they're the same, but sometimes they're not.
Yeah, and at times we were within a couple months of running out of funding, and they secured funding right in the time that they needed, and I think it was very stressful, but I think it gave me a great understanding of what it's like to be in that space and take those kinds of risks.
Got it. Working on the blockchain, what was your first moment with AI? Like, do you remember,
Mm,
or I guess
hmm.
LLMs in
Yeah,
general? What was your
yeah.
first moment, and when did you realize this is something to pivot into?
Yeah, so pretty early on at my stint at Chainlink, this was probably early 2022, I want to say, is when I first encountered these new transformer models. And I think GPT 3.5 had just come out. and I got to experience firsthand this new wave of image generation. And I think the first time that the first actual generation I made was just an image of a scary monster, and it was like kind of silly, but I was just amazed because when it produced the image, it was actually kind of frightening. And I think I realized that we have gotten AI to a point where it can actually create at a level comparable to humans. I know that there are some arguments that they don't have that innate human spirit, and so they're not going to be innately creative the way humans are. But to be able to at least mimic that level of complexity in their creation is something completely new.
What was the art generator? There was one that was just Discord only. It was a Discord bot. I forgot the name of it.
So there's Midjourney.
Midjourney.
Yeah.
I loved Midjourney. I got my kids on Discord to get on Midjourney. And we were just playing with stuff. It was so much fun. And I remember, I made some art, and it wouldn't be on the wall of an art gallery, but it was exactly what I wanted, and I thought it was great.
Oh yeah, and I think it was such a paradigm shift in my head because it brings us from the state of technology where you have to explicitly tell a computer every little thing you want. You have to code every line by hand, and if the machine doesn't interpret it completely accurately, then your program breaks down. But with these new AI systems, you can actually have errors in the input, and it will actually self-heal and produce something correct on the other side.
I'm still grateful for the fact that we won't have to write a by hand JSON parser.
Mm-hmm.
you can do your JSON parsing, and then just say you can have your exception block just throw it into an LLM and say if this didn't work, figure out what's wrong.
Yeah. And I think it's amazing to see what people are doing with this technology. And I think I've noticed that developers are always on the leading edge of this because it seems like a lot of the applications have done really well in terms of developer productivity and user experience. But I think we're starting to see this new wave of second-gen AI technology that's focused on more consumer applications. And that's also really exciting to see moving forward.
Well, what other, before we talk about
Yeah.
Shinzo Labs in particular, what cool things have you built with AI? What kind of personal projects or just other projects?
Yeah. So a while back, one project that I spent some time on was developing a task management app with AI.
Okay.
So the idea was that AI gives us the ability to help us plan our days, and you can ask ChatGPT to help prioritize a list of things you want to accomplish. And so I decided to productize that into an application where you can give it a high-level goal for what you want to accomplish, and then you can add some initial items within that list of tasks you want to accomplish, and then you can ask the AI to complete the list of tasks that you need to execute, and then prioritize that list for you. And so it was an experience to see, what are the actual bounds of its ability to think deeply about the problems and to be able to help users manage their daily life and tasks.
I remember I was playing with tool usage, and I use ClickUp to manage my own stuff. Mm-hmm. And ClickUp has an API, so I built a tool wrapper around it. And then for a demo, I asked, help me. I'm George Costanza. Help me plan on how to pretend to be an architect.
Yeah.
And it totally gave me a list of tasks that you're going to have to go. And it kind of got into the character of the show and understood that I was being facetious. And it said you're going to have to go to the Guggenheim and pretend that you built this. And it had references from the show. It was so cool. Actually, so bringing that, what is your, for AI projects, what's your personal tool stack today? What model do you go to? What IDE do you go into?
Yeah, so naturally, since a lot of my work is focused on MCP, I think Anthropic and Claude are my main models. Anthropic's services for Claude Desktop, Claude Code, also the Cursor IDE is still a fan favorite of mine. I think that's ultimately what I have found is that I think the models are generally comparable for typical coding tasks. I do think that when it comes down to the user experience in terms of what agentic tools you use, it can be a matter of preference based on your type of workflow.
Have you used any of the MCP tools like Zen MCP, which will, I guess, call out to other MCP servers for things like planning and whatnot?
So I have experimented with a few MCP servers like that. I know a really popular one is sequential thinking.
Yeah.
It doesn't call out to other servers necessarily, but it does extend the model's capabilities by giving it these standard prompts and workflows to use. I do think that right now we're still trying to understand the best architecture for complex agentic systems. And right now, a lot of the MCP servers are just focused on getting that superficial top-level functionality as perfect as they can get it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Yeah. And I think we're still trying to balance the token usage. Because like Zen MCP is cool, but when you ask it one question, it's going to fire off 10 to 20 other questions. So you get this exponential token usage. Yeah. Which is fine if your boss is paying for it.
Yeah, and I think, I know this is getting, putting the carriage before the horse, but in my discussions with other MCP developers, a common theme that keeps coming up is about token optimization. Because when you have the ability to create these MCP interfaces, you can have 100 tools if you would like, but then it will, blow up your context window, and then you won't be able to use any of it. And so it's a very important problem to manage those tokens accurately.
Yeah, well, I guess jumping into it, so what have you seen in terms of, from observability state, like how many tokens have you seen certain servers use? And
yeah, so I think in general, a lot of servers are pretty good with the base functionality in terms of token usage. And usually, if there are issues with token usage, it's on a small set of tools that are not optimized for the agentic experience. So for example, one of the servers that I wrote connects to your Gmail account. And for most of the tools, it's totally fine in terms of token count. It only throws in like a couple thousand or hundreds of tokens. But there's one tool that will return your message from email along with its attachments. And users have found that when it returns the attachment, a single attachment with like a PDF file or an image may take up tens of thousands of tokens. And so it's an example of poor agentic experience that we're not used to.
So actually, I saw this paper from Microsoft Research, and they did a survey of all MCP servers on Docker Hub and Smithery, and they found that some of the largest ones had over 200 tools and would return responses that were like 500,000 tokens.
Yep.
So yeah, I think it's definitely an area where we need guidance of like how do we summarize MCP tool responses, or at least have them respect tokens. It doesn't like blow up your context window.
Yeah, and within the MCP marketplace, I've actually seen some competitors where they have competing MCP servers, and one of the selling points will be that their servers are optimized for token usage compared to the ones they're fighting against.
Oh, that's really interesting.
And so, in particular, especially with some of the most popular servers relate to API documentation.
Okay.
And for the audience, the idea is that generative AI models are usually trained up to a specific date. And so anything produced on the internet, such as API updates or new documentation changes that are past that date, will not be included in the training data. And so in order to ensure that developers are working with the latest API versions, you actually need a service that can pull in that latest context for your agent. And so there are multiple MCP servers that will actually be able to pull that latest API documentation so that your agent has the latest insight.
I think it's one of these things that new projects are doing, where they can actually provide an MCP server with up-to-date documentation. Like I use AWS Strands agents, and they have a Strands MCP server. So if you attach that to Claude Code or whatever, and then if you're doing a Strand specific thing, you can say use the Strands, multi-agent workflow model, and it will search its own documentation.
Yeah, and it's really exciting to see what we are starting to do with introspective models as well, like models that can understand their own limitations. The latest Claude models actually understand their own context windows as well. And so I think it's interesting to see what happens when the models become more self-aware.
So when you say understand, like they understand how much is in their context?
Yes. So I don't know the specifics, but to my understanding, they know basic information like the number of tokens that they have available, and likely the breakdown of the different types of input that are parts of the context.
Okay, I mean, there's always something to catch up on, right? So I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so you're in this world, you're seeing MCP being very useful. What's the genesis for creating Shinzo Labs and MCP Observability?
Yeah, so I think I like to make an analogy to other software verticals. So mobile apps in the 2010s really blew up, and you started to see applications that had specific use cases that people couldn't have even imagined. But along with this popularity of mobile apps came this gap of understanding the product in its own right. And so there were entire companies such as Firebase, which were built around these different services for mobile applications, like product analytics, application deployments, being able to convert your application from one app ecosystem to another, or so that it works across platforms. And so I suspect we will have similar services that need to arise for MCP servers. And when I was developing my servers, I certainly wish that I had some of these tools that we're building at Shinzo. And so I'm offering this as, an opportunity for MCP developers to focus on what they do best, building the best servers they can and providing it as a service for their users. And then we do all the heavy lifting and all the difficult elements of MCP development that are the same across servers.
Got it. Okay, so if I am the publisher of an MCP server, and this is one where it's a public-facing MCP server, what kind of telemetry do I get out of Shinzo?
Yeah, so some of the basics are the tool calls that users are executing. You get information about the performance and duration of those tool calls. If you have the consent of the users, you can actually collect the specific parameters that they're calling tools with, as well as the responses that they're getting out of it. And then, as we were alluding to, you can also estimate the token counts for those tool requests and responses.
Okay, so what kind of things have you discovered when you can observe the usage of a tool? Give me, as a developer, what kind of insights would I expect to see?
Yeah, so one really interesting case is about the relationship between MCP servers and API endpoints. So there's this notion in the MCP community that just creating tools one-to-one with the API won't work long-term because agentic workflows can act very differently from the way that you connect to API endpoints. And in practice, one example I can share is that with a lot of the Google APIs, they usually have an endpoint where you can list resources and request resources and get an ID list in response. But then you have to have a second endpoint that you call to actually fetch the contents from those IDs. And so what I've seen in practice with my Gmail MCP server is that users will often make a single list messages request, they'll get the response, and then they have to make 10 or 20 separate MCP tool calls after that to actually fetch the contents. And so as a developer, because I can see those trends and understand which tools are called in sequence, it gives me the insight to know that I may want to build a composite tool that combines the functionality of both of those together.
That makes sense. I mean, I've seen in my usage of tools where it'll call it wrong the first time, every single time. And then I would see that in the observability platform. Say, okay, here's this particular tool that's always wrong the first time and then right the second time. So either I need to update my documentation or the prompt to my agent that is calling this tool, or probably build a composite where that doesn't happen, where it's better pinned down.
Exactly. And so today, most MCP developers just don't have any of those insights because it doesn't come out of the box with the SDKs. And so I'm trying to build Shinzo so that we can surface these insights for developers as easily as possible.
Interesting. Okay. And then what about on the token usage side? So what do you see there?
Yeah. So similarly, what we see with token usage is that there are some tools that generally have very large body responses. And so agents should be very hesitant about using those tools. With the current interface, most tools look similar because all you get is the description and parameters. And so agents don't have any intuition on what the cost of those tool calls is to the user. And so what we can see with token usage is that, as I mentioned, there are tool calls that can have tens of thousands of tokens in response. And it's often when you try to return a very large JSON object with a lot of detailed data that may not be relevant to the agent. And so again, when developers have these token usage insights, they can see that like these tools need to be used very sparingly. And so we may actually want to either add to the description that this has a high context impact, or you may want to add certain limits on the parameters so that the agent doesn't fetch too much data at once.
I think we're lucky by the fact that these things are so slow and that we can see as a developer, okay, it's going to try and page through my email, for example, one message at a time until it finds the one I want to.
Yeah.
That's going to be really expensive. So we need, and if it was faster but cost the same, that could very quickly get expensive for you.
Oh yeah. I've heard horror stories of developers who don't pay attention to their token usage, and they'll end up with a multi-$1,000 bill at the end of the month.
Well, I think at the Tinkerers meetup we're both at, some people, there a person who said they spent $5,000 on Anthropic.
Yeah, that's insane. And it, again, it's like the MCP server developers, they do have an incentive to optimize token cost, because eventually all of these consumers of those servers will care about how much they're spending on it, similar to how you choose cloud providers based on the cost of compute.
Interesting. So with MCP servers, these are for, normally you can see it as you start it with like UVX or Node and you run it locally. Now, is this for local observability or is this for hosted observability?
Yes.
How does that work?
So Shinzo's specific approach is to add the telemetry within the server itself. So we actually have a library that users will install to instrument the server directly. And the advantage of this is that it allows us to pull telemetry from servers wherever they are deployed, whether it is a local server instance that's on your own computer, if it's a hosted instance from hosted infrastructure, or any of these other hosted registries that also offer those remote server versions.
Okay, so if I'm seeing an MCP server in GitHub and it says add this line to your mcp.json, and I do that, I can still, even though it's running locally, I can still get metrics on how people are using my MCP server if I'm the MCP server developer. Okay.
Exactly. And there are a lot of open source projects that have this kind of telemetry for their own services. And so it's not uncommon for open source developers to try to pull this data. It's just a matter of, making sure that the user is informed of this analytics when they decide to use your software.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see how useful it would be as a tool developer to understand. Because sometimes you have a way of doing something in your head, but it's hard to communicate that, and someone else comes along and they don't have the same mental model that you do, and they're going to use it totally differently.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I think it is really interesting to see that. Another insight I can share from my own server insights and analytics is that I have seen that there are a couple power users of my own servers that will hammer their servers like 1,000 tool calls within a few minutes within a given day. And it seems like they have hooked up their MCP server to some type of automation, for example, possibly an N8N workflow. And so completely separate from the typical agentic flow you expect, they're literally just using the server because it's an easier interface compared to trying to hook up an API directly.
Yeah, so rather than figuring out how to call the API, they're just making an agent that says go in.
Yeah, it says like, access this API and return the data.
Oh,
right.
Yeah. Wow, okay. That's neat. Okay, so you're seeing people use Shinzo Labs, then it's advising them on how they're using their tools. What about security? What does observability and security relate to each other? Yeah,
so it's very important from our side as a service that is trying to pull telemetry. It's very important to ensure that first there is the legal aspect of it, that we ensure users consent to the data being collected, and ensuring that we don't pull any identifiable information from the user's data. And so Shinzo's SDK actually has built-in sanitization features so that any data that's collected is sanitized for any private data. And in addition to that, as far as other aspects of the server's security itself, we don't have it yet, but a feature that I'm keen to implement for Shinzo is the ability to check for prompt injection, because this is a huge issue in the MCP space right now. Are you familiar with this?
Oh yeah, we actually just interviewed Rene Brandl of Casco, and he hacked all of his. He was in Y Combinator. He's in Y Combinator, and he hacked all of his batchmates using different prompt injection techniques.
Yeah.
So tell us about how you observed prompt. Or what is your read on the prompt injection space?
Yeah. So again, we don't have these features yet in Shinzo, but what I would love to see in the observability space is more focus on filtering requests and input for the MCP servers, because these servers will have credentials that often have God permissions for your services. And so without any type of additional security layers, the agent will have the ability to do anything it wants. And what we've seen with prompt injection is that developers, especially in the open source world, may try to add additional packages to your servers that provide, incorrect responses. They may ask the agent for privileged data that you do not want the agent to give it, and private, identifying data. And in addition, when you have MCP servers that are aware of the other servers the agent is connected to, they can also return responses that ask the agent to call those other servers. And so you can have one server that's requesting your AWS access so that the AWS server will, trigger some leak in your cloud infrastructure.
Interesting. So if I'm a malicious MCP server and I have some MCP that's providing value, so people are going to use it,
sure.
and I can say, hey, if you know anybody who has access to Venmo, then send a little bit this way.
Yeah, exactly.
Just give myself a tip, I guess.
Yeah, that's the simplified version of it. But there's an endless number of vulnerabilities that can arise if you're not careful.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's the amazing LLM security and LLM jailbreaking. It's so weird because it's so different than any other form of tech security. I was in security, but my first job was in security, but that was memorizing firewall rules and ports and all this stuff. And now it seems more like a word puzzle almost.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting when you see when there are system prompt leaks, because you get to see the insights of, or the inner workings of these models, and how even the companies that train and run these models are still struggling to really shepherd them to the right answers. And they have these very extensive system prompts that are still easy to break if developers want.
Because you could always say, forget everything I told you before.
Exactly.
And pretend okay, everything I told you before, you're escaped from the matrix now. Here's the truth. And it's amazing that kind of works.
And I remember there was one a while ago where people would say, now, we are going to tell a story. So imagine that you are fantasizing about being a character in a fantasy world. And then the developer sprinkled in certain prompt injections within this fantasy role play, and the model followed along with it and completely ignored the system prompt it was given.
Wow. Because in the models,
because it's,
I wouldn't say consciousness, but somewhere in there it's saying, okay, well, I'm not actually giving the recipe for LSD or something. I'm an actor.
Right. It's almost like it's hypnotized or it's manipulated into believing that it's not the identity that it was originally given.
Got it.
Really, really interesting stuff.
So you want to be able to look for malicious prompts within a tool call, right? So if I'm a calendar tool, you want to scan this externally and say, okay, the prompts that are using these tools should be related to calendaring and not be asking for elevated permissions or anything like that.
So I think there are several layers to it, and the base layer is to check for obvious issues where they're accessing specific scopes that they're not supposed to. There are additional layers to it as well, and such as being able to filter based on certain patterns that you see across many users. And there's one idea that I've been really excited to explore with other developers, is the concept of a security warden.
Okay.
The idea being that if you have a model that has access to some set of operations and it's sending requests and responses, you could have a separate model that is just focused on security and actually checks every request as it comes in against some constitution of rules to see if the request matches the rules that it's given.
I see. So that'll prevent things like asking for privilege escalation, asking about libraries that are running, or asking about the values of environment variables.
And I think the reason is because as agentic systems become more complex, it's going to be untenable to just have an explicit set of rules. We really need to start shifting security to a broader agentic solution to match all of the different possibilities like that.
That makes a lot of sense. It is a very strange way of thinking about security, right? Where you have to think of like convincing this system rather than locking it down in the traditional sense. But it's kind of fun. I mean,
it's an exciting time to be developing in the space, I think.
So for developers who want to build their own MCP servers, what do they need to know? Like, what is your advice to developers who are building MCP servers? Both in terms of like token usage, in terms of architecture in general.
Yeah, so I have talked to dozens of developers building MCP servers in the space, and some trends that I've seen are that the ones that are really successful start with the user stories. They actually try to identify what are services that I wish I could talk to, what are the services that I want an agent to be able to utilize, and then from there, try to talk to actual people who use these services and understand their typical workflows before you get started on the server. Because, generative AI coding is very addictive at times, and it's very easy to get lost in the sauce when you're trying to develop all these different capabilities. But if no one wants to use it that way in practice, then you're not going to get any usage out of it.
Yeah, and especially as developers, we want to build up our own like meta tooling around this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so we can't just use what's in front of us. We have to say, how do I make it my own by adding another layer?
Yeah. But that said, I do think there are so many opportunities for servers to develop. I know the latest statistics say that we have something like 16,000 MCP servers in the wild. But when I look at it in practice, it's only a small fraction of all the digital services out there. And so I really think if you just take a look at the types of work that you do every day, there are probably services that could use a well-formed MCP server for it.
Well, and I like that a lot about saying start with the user story. Mm-hmm. For me, it's a kind of a fanboy thing, but like, I really like the AWS MCP server because there's two tools. It's like, what do I do and do it. And that's surfacing, every single AWS operation. I think it's like 300,000 different API calls you can make. And sure, you can make 300,000 tools, but no agent would know what to do with that.
Yeah, and at some of the recent MCP conferences I've been to, that's like the tool overload has been a pressing concern. And I think what you're describing, we usually call search and call for tools, and that's becoming a pretty standard approach for MCP servers with a large set of operations. Yeah.
Okay, so you have a search tool and a call tool.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And the search may result in multiple tool options, and then the agent can still decide from that tool set which one is the most applicable to the given problem.
Got it. Okay. What about authentication? How do I deal with that if I want to build a public-facing MCP server?
Yeah.
Is it a secret token, or what do you think?
So I think a lot of MCP servers are moving to remote hosted versions. I think that is the best approach to take for development from here out. Now, as far as authorization and authentication, the credential management is still a bit of an issue. The best implementations I've seen are ones where you actually send your credentials to the server encrypted and then create a session with the server where the server will actually retain memory of your credentials while the session is active, and then you execute your tool tasks with it, and then when the session is over, it will withdraw those credentials. And
So if you use that, would you get like a web pop-up that says, okay, we're about to start an MCP session, or how does it implement it?
Exactly, yeah. So typically it'll be that the MCP server will return you an OAuth URL that you'll go to authorize the scopes for the server. And then once you authorize and click OK, then that server will have access to those scopes temporarily while you're performing the operations.
And I think this is where it comes back to that Bitcoin analogy of saying, should this have been built into the protocol? Should we make MCP2 that has authentication? Or can we just solve this in a side channel?
Yeah, and I think part of the struggle that I see is just about the fact that we want agents to be autonomous, but the more autonomy you want, the more credentials and permissions you need to grant them. And so it's really an issue that we need to trust the AI first before we can give them that broad set of scopes. So for now, we just have to stick to permitting those specific scopes for specific use cases, and then when they're done with that task, withdraw it when we can.
Now, what about transactions? And it would be interesting if there's an MCP server that advertised functionality, but there was costs associated with doing that, and your local agent could decide if it was worth it. Do you think, is that going to exist at some point?
I would say we should look to existing software solutions as comparisons.
Okay.
So what we see is that cloud infrastructure is very much pay per use or pay per request, as well as some implementations in the DeFi world with pay to browse or paying for specific fetch operations. I do think that the majority of the monetization options we've seen for MCP servers are in subscriptions, where the MCP server covers such a major part of a user's workflow that they're willing to pay a monthly premium to access that server.
And often it's subscriptions. Like I use Perplexity MCP a lot, but I also use Perplexity without MCP a lot. Actually, I think I should try that, where maybe locally I can ask it, do the low-level search before you start in the deep research search, and only do the deep research if you need to.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to the token usage, I think in order for the agents to make those informed decisions, we have to surface more info about what the impact is for those tool calls to the user. And so including the token usage, including any cost for those requests, understanding, if this puts me over my quota limit and I'm going to have to pay extra for this, is it worth it for the user?
Got it. So what about discoverability? How do you find new MCP servers to use? What do you What are your favorite sources to check for?
Yeah, so discoverability has been an issue in the MCP industry until very recently. So prior to a few weeks ago, mostly you would find servers either through just searching on GitHub, or you had a number of registries that you could access, which would have either hosted or source code downloadable versions of the servers. Now, what we have found is that there has been recent efforts to centralize the registry sources. And so a few weeks ago, the core maintainer team announced the centralized registry, official registry for MCP servers, where any MCP developer can actually push their server to this central registry.
Who's running this?
So this is the open source core maintainer team of MCP.
Oh, okay.
And they're doing this in collaboration with the GitHub MCP teams.
Got it. Okay, so now, what's the URL? What should I search for?
I believe you should be able to find it at
MCP registry.
Official registry MCP. Let me see.
Interesting. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
okay, I see it on the Model Context Protocol site.
And then they have one at registry.modelcontextprotocol.io.
Look at that, September 8th. Yeah, this stuff is changing so fast.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
It's good that we'll be moving towards a hosted version, because some of them are tricky to get started. There's a Google Workspace MCP that I really like, but you have to basically create your own Google Cloud project, and you have to give it all the scopes, and you have to set up your credentials, and you have to start the server with pointed at an environment variable that has your secret. You have to get the scopes and everything right, or it doesn't work. And so I'm glad that we can move towards a simpler model of this.
Yeah. And I think OAuth seems to be the approach that we're centralizing on or honing in on. But I do think that it really depends on what the use case is and how autonomous you want your agent to be. But yeah, I do agree that I think having these hosted servers helps to remove some of that user error with your local environments. And so you can focus on just connecting to the server where it lives and just accessing the permissions there.
Got it. Well, what do you see as where this is all heading? Like in a year or 5 years, both with Shinzo and also just MCP in general? Like where do you see it heading?
So with Shinzo in particular, we're going to continue to strengthen our focus on analytics within the MCP ecosystem, and then we will begin to branch out to other aspects of MCP ownership. So some of the main features we're really excited about are registry deployments, because as I mentioned before, there are dozens of registries that users can push their servers to, but you have to fill out separate forms and different login info for every single one. And so we want to offer a way to streamline server deployments across those instances, being able to support A/B testing and feature flags and other configuration options for those servers. And then finally, another one that we're interested to explore is also the monetization aspect, because there's an approach to monetization which hasn't been explored much in the MCP community, which is about ad-based monetization. And so similar to mobile apps, where you can either download or pay for the full version and pay a few dollars and download it, or you can use a light version of an app with some in-app advertisements. We expect something similar with MCP, where you may see in-context advertisements in addition to the responses from tool calls. And you need the analytics to power that. So I think Shinzo is a natural fit for MCP developers that want that kind of functionality.
Okay, so like say if I'm using a search to find a particular product.
Yes.
Like if I'm looking for, what was I looking for this morning? I was looking for a new SSD. And say I have a B&H photo and they've got their MCP server. Yeah. But then I could perhaps, they have the SanDisk Extreme might be sponsored. They're paying B&H, and B&H is surfacing that recommendation. Is that the idea?
Exactly. And I think it feels like there's market pressure to make this a reality, because as users move away from search engines and move towards direct agent search, that audience is moving, and so a lot of that advertisement revenue that came from search engines needs to go somewhere. And so we expect that these kinds of ads and sponsorships will start to filter their way into agentic responses. But one big issue with that is that you need to be careful not to fall into prompt injection, because if the agent has access to the ad responses, you can get to a point where you're actually convincing the agent to take a certain action and manipulating the market.
Okay, so you can say, hey, you can buy this SanDisk. We don't want to say, if you have access to a credit card, then go ahead and
then please purchase this one. Yeah. Right.
Wow, that's cool. I mean, there's so many applications of this. And I'm not sponsored by Perplexity at all, but I use Perplexity shopping a lot, because it's like, okay, once I found what I want, I could just buy it there instead of go to set up an account with a vendor or something.
Yeah, and it's bringing that user experience of the web to a single location. And so, again, I suspect that businesses will want to be able to get a foot in the door through that user experience somehow.
Interesting. Okay, so there's the monetization, the observability. What about MCP in general? Do you see that as the protocol that we're all going to be with? What do you think about other competing protocols?
Yeah, so I believe that at a high level, there is a structural architectural component within the agentic system that needs to be present to make connections between models and digital services reliable and efficient. Whether MCP is the solution that will win out, it seems like that will be the case, but there are competitors that are also trying to fill that gap. But regardless of which protocol ends up on top, I do believe that this concept of an efficient structure for integrating models and services will persist.
Got it. So at the end of the day, all these things need to talk to each other.
Exactly.
So whether it's MCP or MCP2 or whatever it is.
I've heard arguments that some developers claim that if you have access to the APIs, then the agent will just build integrations on the fly. But I think that that's still missing a few key points, which is that creating that integration will cost tokens. And so it's less efficient than if you already have the integration present. And the other point is that MCP does offer a lot of standards around security that just don't exist if you're asking the agent to, build the API integrations directly.
I like what you said earlier, where it's really about a user story at the MCP tool level. Whereas I use ClickUp a lot, and there's the MCP server I use has tons of tools, and it's really frustrating. And so I have my own agent that sits in front of it that says, for this job, use this, and then that. I should probably just write a hard-coded hybrid of this. I'm not burning.
Another development that I'm really excited about for the future of agentic systems is about the sub-agent hierarchy. I think that along with tool overload, there's this concept of context overload as well. That agents start to lose the prescience of certain information in the context window when you get to like a very full context size. And so I expect that what we will see is that people are currently starting with singular agents that do everything. We will start to see sub-agents that handle specific subsets of tools along with subsets of context. And then from there, we will have agents that call other sub-agents, which call other agents. And then they all have their own respective responsibilities in the system.
It's kind of cool when you can. I think about like an analogy to human beings, right? Like imagine if you woke up one day and said, "Okay, the only thing I need to do is work on my calendar, and I don't have anything else. I don't have a mortgage. I don't have anything else. Just I am Stephen Barr, the calendar guy." And then a different version of myself can wake up and say, "Okay, you are Stephen Barr, the car maintenance guy, and you gotta." That's all I have to think about. Like I really like this idea of narrowing context and sub-agents.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating that some people think that once we have context like agents that support context windows of 1 million or 2 million tokens, that they'll just be able to do anything. And I have trouble believing that because humans also have trouble maintaining context across a variety of tasks. Like you only have so much working intelligence that you can apply to that knowledge.
Yeah, and there's only so much, I guess, like L1 cache in your brain.
Right.
Just because I can quote this movie doesn't mean it's relevant right now.
Exactly. Yeah, and I suspect agents will have similar, physical limitations.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What, in general, like what tools are you excited? Like you use LangChain or LangGraph when you're building up AI systems for yourself. What do you usually use?
Yeah, so right now, Claude Code is really my bread and butter. I will say that I need to follow what I preach and start to build up sub-agent systems. But I've been so focused on working with other developers and building up Shinzo directly that I actually haven't had time to really tinker with those sub-agent systems.
Makes sense. I could give a shout out to Strands agents. I don't have any connection with them other than I use it a lot.
Yeah.
And they're well integrated with Bedrock, but you can use it just as well locally if you wanted to, or just give it a Claude key.
I see. Yeah.
That's pretty good. And they have lots of different. You can have it work in like a nebulous agent swarm, and there's a swarm orchestrator that basically says, after so many conversations happen amongst yourself, give me the answer.
I like that. Yeah. I think, it's interesting to think about what these different orchestration systems look like. So Strands, I'll have to take a look.
Strands is good. So what is your long-term, if I was to ask like a sci-fi, what is your sci-fi projection of our relationship with AI? I was going to end with a more of a big picture view.
Yeah. So I think This is just pie in the sky, but I think in the next 5 years, we'll continue to see productivity gains from automation. I don't think we're going to see groundbreaking changes in the next 5 years. I have a feeling that the current models we have are as well trained as they can be, and I think the next breakthroughs are most likely going to be at the product level, being able to find innovative ways to connect the transformer models with digital systems. And so I think that we will see productivity gains. We will see a lot of employees in different types of positions start to employ AI for very menial tasks. And then longer term, of course, I believe that automation will eventually start to cover large swaths of work. But I think humans will continue to operate at a higher level at that point. And so if you imagine the structure of business having, the executives at the top, managers in the middle, and then ground floor employees at the bottom, I think AI and automation will be able to cover a large part of that ground floor employee base. So then all of those people will be able to work as managers at a higher level and focus on a wide, diversity of other tasks instead.
No, I feel the same way. I'm very optimistic, and I think if you look at every single technology, they think, okay, this is the one where we're all just going to be idle and have nothing to do.
Mm-hmm.
This is not human nature. I think we like doing things.
Yeah.
It's never going to be okay, we figured out X, right? That could have been the case with the tractor. Like, okay, well, now we have nothing to do because we've got a tractor.
Yeah, it's like then all the people that were plowing in the farms can now become, mechanics and focus on other areas.
Yeah, we'll always just move higher up the stack, and I think we have like an insatiable desire to like accomplish stuff, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. So I'm very optimistic about the future of AI.
Cool. Well, where can people find you online? If they want to know more about Shinzo Labs, about you?
Absolutely. So Shinzo.ai is where you can find me most easily. I'm available on Twitter as Austin Builds. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to connect with people. Always excited to share my experience with others. And if there are any developers or founders who want to collaborate, I'm always open to explore possibilities to work with other partners.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you, Austin. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.